I've got to tell you, I don't make many of the financial decisions around here, as you know, but Sally had to play so long, gets out here, and then they're in that fellowship. I think we should double her salary for the week. I did also want to thank you. We have so much going on at the church right now. We had a great business meeting this morning, but I wanted to thank Doug and Urba and Mike Collins. The budget committee just did a phenomenal job of preparing that, and Miss Lois did a great job, as she always does with those treasurer's reports. We have so many people who do so many things around here, and I don't thank them enough, and I wanted to do that for sure. I was asked to preach on two things. We're still doing the sermons by request, and two things that came up more than once. I decided to combine into one sermon. And it came up a little bit in our church-wide Sunday school a couple weeks ago, but one thing that people want me to talk about is why should we even go to church? I mean, what are the advantages? And even more than that, how do we get people to come to our church? And that's a difficult order on both tasks a little bit. I don't know why we come here. I think there's so many good things. I limited what I wanted to talk about because I think church has so many benefits, but it's worth addressing. I think it's one of those things where the people that you see the most and the things that are there every week you take for granted until they're gone. And I don't want us to take our church for granted. I don't think I'll be speaking today on anything you don't know other than the text itself. But I think occasionally it's good just to appreciate the jewel we have in this church. And I think I'd like to talk some about that. The text I'm using today is a little obscure, but I've always loved it. As a preface, my friends are big fans of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is a Christian series by Tolkien. And my own experience with Lord of the Rings, about 10 years ago, my friends thought it would be a great idea to watch the extended editions of the movie back to back to back. And the extended editions of these things are longer than 4 hours long. So we spent 13 hours one day watching the Lord of the Rings. And that was, until the last month or two, that's the only time I'd ever had any experience. And they all ran together. And to be honest, there's not many things I can sit through 13 hours in a day, so I've never loved the Lord of the Rings because of that. Essentially, my friends ruined it for me in a lot of ways. But as you know, I've been required to rest a little bit more lately, so I rewatched those over a longer period of time, and I enjoyed them, and I talked to my friends about them, and I asked them, compared to the source material, they love those books. Did you like the movies? And the reason those movies are so long is they tried to make them as close to the books as possible. They tried to capture everything in the books, and they wanted the people that love the books to love the movies because the people that made the movies love the books. And there was one thing that kept coming up, though, in my conversations with my friends that love this series, and there was a character named Tom Bombadil. Has anybody ever heard of Tom Bombadil? Yes, who they absolutely loved. And Peter Jackson, who made the movies, just could not work this character in the movies. He is just this carefree type guy, and Tolkien would write poems and adventures of Tom Bombadil. The problem, and the reason they took him out of the movies was he didn't necessarily advance the plot. And to a person, they all love this character, but they also realize that when you're making a 4.5 hour movie and you had to cut something, they understand why this character had to be cut as much as they loved him. Well, the story that I'm going to read to you today is a story that I honestly think the same way about. There's a character in the Old Testament who appears in 4 verses, doesn't appear before or after, just comes up out of nowhere, and that's all we have of it. Doesn't add anything particularly to the story, but I love the story. So I'm going to read Numbers 10, verses 29 to 32. This is page 121 in your Pew Bibles. Just so you know, the book of Numbers is the 4th book of the Bible. It's in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. And it's called Numbers because it's centered around 2 censuses of people. They take a census at the beginning of the book and a census at the end, and it's quite literally numbers. Sometimes people who try to read their Bible in order, most people don't make it through Leviticus, if we're going to be completely honest, but Numbers bogs them down even more sometimes. I will say this, the book of Numbers has some phenomenal stories in it that are well worth reading. I really like the book. But this is one of those tidbits that's in there that I just think is telling and is teachable, even though very few people care about it. Moses said to Hobab, the son of Moses' father-in-law, ruled the Midianite, "We're setting out for the place the Lord promised. I will give it to you. Come with us, us, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel." But he replied to him, "I don't want to go. Instead, I will go to my own land and my relatives." "Please don't leave us," Moses said, "since you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our eyes. If you come with us, whatever good the Lord does for us, we will do for you." It's a really short and simple conversation between Moses and his brother-in-law. Until now, we had no idea Moses' brother-in-law was camping with the Israelites. And once he leaves, we really don't know what becomes of him. But it's a story. I don't know if you've ever had somebody visit your house, even if just for a dinner, and you had a really good time with them and you just didn't want them to leave. And when they go out the door, you're trying to say anything you can to keep them to stay. Their absence will be noticeable to you. And this is kind of what's going on here. He comes up to his brother-in-law, the Midianite, and this, so you know, if you read commentaries on this, nobody deals with the story itself. There's dispute over whether this is actually his father-in-law or his brother-in-law. I'm going to take the text literally and say it's his brother-in-law. And it's time to go, is what he's saying. We have been in this wilderness for quite a while, and it's time to move on. And since we're moving on, we want to make sure you know you're invited. I don't know if you've ever had that experience too, where you're dealing with a group of people and you just assume they're invited. And I think it's a good thing. You're one of us, is what it's saying. I don't know if you have people or friends. I'm both an only child and I'm single, which means I'm excessively close to my friends by nature. Only child children, because they don't have brothers and sisters, tend to be very close to their close friends. And there's certain people that when their families get together, I don't get asked because it's assumed that I will be there. But it's always nice to be asked. And I think that's what's going on here. Moses is saying, by the way, we accept you as one of us and we want you to come with us. And I don't know if he doesn't want to go or he wants reassurance that they really want him. If he's a southerner, he just wants reassurance that they really want him. He just says, "No, I don't want to. I just want to go home." And I understand that completely. I want to go to my own land and my own relatives. And that's a natural response. I miss what I'm used to. And Moses replies again, "Please don't leave us. You know where we can camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our eyes. You know this land better than we do. Serve as our guide. Be the tour guide for the promised land. If you come with us, we'll share whatever good we get." And the next sentence is, "They set out from the mountain," and I assume he goes with them. And it's a short and sweet story of just a brother-in-law asking his brother-in-law to stay with him on the journey. And there's only really two things that I want to talk about today about what this means to me. I think when you ask somebody to do something, there ought to be something in it for them. As far as there ought to be a benefit of some kind. You ought to think you have something to give. I always equate inviting somebody to church and inviting them on a date, because for me, a lot of times in my youth, there were similar things. Maybe when I'm married, because my dates went to church with me. It's like sprung for the big spender there. But if I walked up to somebody and said, "I don't have much to offer, but would you go out with me?" Who would want that? And who would get really excited to go out with somebody who didn't think anything of themselves and didn't think they had anything to offer? And Moses is really clear here. We think we have something that's beneficial to you. He says it twice. "Come with us and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel." And the first one is, we'll treat you well. And the second one gets even better. If you come with us, whatever good the Lord does for us, we will do for you. He makes it more explicit. It increases. Things really good stuff is going to happen for us, and we're going to be good to you, is the first thing he says. And then, after he says no, it's just to clarify here, whatever good for us happens, we'll share with you. You're in it with us. And I think that's how you ask people to church. You tell them what we have to offer, and the reminder is we do have things to offer. I know that young people don't go to church like they used to, and I honestly think it's an oversight. I think they miss something by not being in church. And there are three things that I wanted to... It's so hard for me to limit the benefits of church. But if I had to limit to three, the things I want to talk about are fellowship, what we do at the break and we talk to each other. I think there's things that happen when we meet together. That's the Hebrews 10:25. Even in the early days of the church, people were thinking, maybe we don't really need to be together when we worship. Maybe you can go worship on the golf course on Sunday morning by yourself and commune with God, and that's just as good. And I think there's a time and place for that. But I think there's something happens that when we meet together that you can't get anywhere else. Last night I was, in theory, taking one for the team, but not really. One of my best friend's girlfriends who I'm very close to, it was her birthday, and one of the things she wanted to do for her birthday was go to the latest Nicholas Sparks film, which is a chick flick. And her boyfriend's not very much into that, so I took Andrea to dinner and a movie with her boyfriend's blessing, of course. He was just thankful he didn't have to see the movie. And Andrea and I spend a lot of time together, and we very rarely spend time together without our friends. And she asked me a question that I don't think I've been asked since I was very little. And she asked me who my best friend was. And the reason she asked me is because she knows there's 7 different guys who would say I'm their best friend. And she wanted to know who I considered to be my best friend. And I answered what I would do in any situation, which is my dad is my best friend. My dad has been my best friend since I was little, and my dad will probably be my best friend till one of us isn't here. But she goes, no, I know that. I'd say my dad's my best friend too. I want to know who's your real best friend that you know, of our friends. And it's one of the few times, as you know, I'm very transparent. I didn't answer. I just said, I guess it would depend on the situation and what was going on. And she goes, I think Josh is your best friend. And that's not her boyfriend. And it was interesting that she would say that, because my other group of friends has far more in common with me than Josh does. But Josh is the most Christian of all my friends. And church means more to him than anyone else, than my friends. And God means more to me than anyone else. And he's the one, when I have something to talk about, I can be completely honest, because God is a factor in my life and God is a factor in his life. And we can talk on a similar plane. It's not that I love him more than others. It's just he gets me more because we share this great thing in common, and that Jesus is really important to both of us. And I think when you come to church and you have people who share this common love for Christ, you have a level of understanding you don't have with other people. I've always loved church. I think I love this church more than any place I've ever been, because I've got an extra family here. It's just, there's things that you can't pass up about a small church that you just can't replicate in other places. This Thursday, I did what I often do, which is as I ate with Irva and Sally, and I was ordering my meal. And I ordered chicken and dumplings with biscuit, and that may be all I ordered. And Sally corrected my order and added carrots to my order. And Irva responded and said, yes, give them carrots. The waitress brought out carrots, and I ate those carrots, because see, Irva and Sally care about me, and they know that I've been exhausted lately, and they want me to have vegetables in my system. So I ate the carrots that I did not order for myself. It's wonderful to have people care about you. And this church is family to me. And it's a type of family that I consider a lot of my friends' family, but it's a different type of family. There's a fellowship that comes in church that you just don't get anywhere else. And I don't ever think we should take that for granted. Because we come here every week, or most weeks, and it's too easy to take for granted, but it's something to remember. And so when people ask me why they should come to church, I think fellowship's a big part of it. But we're not just like a country club, because you can get that type of thing where you know people elsewhere. Our focus is on God. Jesus says in Matthew 18, where 2 or more are gathered together, I am also there. And I think that we're designed to be in community. There are things we can learn about God together that we can't learn by ourselves. There are things that young people can teach me that I think goes without saying. I think everybody knows that older people, I hope you know that the older Christians have something to offer. I learn from all of you all of the time. There are things that you know because you've walked places that I just haven't yet. And I learn constantly. And no matter how much school that I have invested in, which is a ton, I think I've been in school for 30 straight years. It's incredible to me to think about. I study all the time. There are things that I can't learn from a textbook. There are things you have to know from people who walk there. There are lessons that some of you know that I hope I don't have to learn. But your experience is more valuable than mine. But I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that our young people have something great to offer. I love this story, and I believe in it, even though I don't fully understand it. It's one of the hit books in Christianity a few years ago. It's Parker Palmer's Let Your Life Speak. It's a very short book, and people were reading that in the early 2000s. And there's a story in there where a father listens in. He has two kids. One's 3 or 4, and the other's a newborn. And the 3 or 4-year-old asks for a private audience with the baby, which could scare the fool out of you if you're a parent. And so the father consents and says, yes, you can go talk to your baby sister. But the father stays very close at the door and listens with the ear and wants to know what the child has to say to her baby sibling. This is what she says. She whispers in the baby's ear, tell me about God. I've almost forgotten. I don't know what happens in the womb, but I think you know things there. You feel things, and there are things that kids know that maybe we adults just lose sight of. They can see things, and kids say profound, wonderful things, and sometimes they get it. Sometimes I don't understand kids. I've got a family of 3 that I love dearly. They're a family of 5, so there were 3 little girls, probably I think 9, 7, and 3. And the little girl was asking her oldest sister this past week, Allie, why are there 50 states? And Allie explains that there are different parts of the country, and she just gives a great answer for a 9-year-old. She explains the West Coast, the East Coast, and the Midwest, and it was a brilliant answer. And Chase, the little 3-year-old, response is that why Jesus had to die for our sins? Geography, theology, I don't know, but there may be something there that kid saw that I don't know. But there are things when we get together and we wrestle with God that we can learn together that we don't get just reading by ourselves. That I think is really profound. I would say that's the Big C church, but as far as our church, I think this church, and I'm saying this because I'm a pastor partly, but I think this is one of the best places I've ever met to learn about God. It's ironic because I don't have a single Sunday school teacher at this church who does not doubt their own ability. I get that all the time. I just don't know if I'm doing a good job. I would take the Sunday school teachers at this church over any church I've been to, and I had Sunday school teachers in my home church with seminary degrees. I think it's a phenomenal place to learn. I'd like to think your pastor is educated as well, but even more so than our education, this is one of the few churches I've been to where it's okay to ask questions and wrestle with the issues. And to me, that's what it is as far as learning about God. The Hebrews' biggest identity story, the name Israel, where we get Israelites, means he who wrestles with God. Genesis 32. It was Jacob, the character, wrestles all night, and that's how he gets his name. And I think it's very telling that they consider learning about God a wrestling process. It's not easy. It's not multiple choice. It's not memorizing answers. It's wrestling with the subjects. And this is a great place to wrestle with God and learn. And it's an environment you don't get at every church, and that's worth remembering. The last thing that I would talk about is it's a great place to worship. And we take that for granted in this country. There's so many places you can worship, and we have the freedom of religion. We talked about Veterans Day because of our veterans. We are free to worship the God we choose. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But I would remind you that worship is a privilege. It's the one thing I know that I will do in this life that I'll do in the next. I have a real hard time with the next life as far as I can't envision it. I know it'd be better. I know it'd be restful. I don't know what my life would be if I wasn't negotiating conflict between people. I spent half of my life, it seems like, doing that type of thing. I'll work like crazy, and I'm sure I'll do some kind of work. I don't know what's going on in the next life, is what I'm telling you. I know it'll be better and good, but I can't visualize it. But the one thing I know I'll be doing is worshiping. It's the one thing for sure that I do in this life that I do in the next life. And I think maybe it's just a privilege and an honor to do that. And it matters. Worshiping God matters. And those are three things I think that we do better when we're together than we do when we're apart. And if I was going to tell somebody to come to this church or ask them, better verbiage there, those are the things I would ask them. There are benefits you get here that you don't get anywhere else. And if you take them for granted, you forget how great a privilege it is just to be here. And so the first thing I will tell you about this, what Moses does right, is he tells Hobab, God is doing really great things with us, and we want you to be a part of it. We have something to offer you. But the thing I don't want you to miss over is this. Please don't leave us, since you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our eyes. When anybody walks through these doors, they have something that they can offer us. It works both ways. Again, going back to my dating analogy, I can tell you this about dating. It's really ironic for me, the single guy giving dating analogy, but I do know this for sure. It's psychologically proven, whether you're dating or in any kind of relationship, people will bond with you more if you ask them to do something for you than if you do something for them. So what I'm telling you is, in very practical sense, in some ways, I'm better off asking a girl, instead of me saying, can I take you to dinner? Can you help me with this project? Is a better approach in some ways. Maybe not in a dating thing, but in a friendship way for sure. People are more attached to you if you ask them to do something for you. I don't fully understand it, but like I said, every psychological test I've ever seen demonstrates that. They speculate that it's a transactional thing where that person that you do something for thinks you owe them in, and that makes them feel good about themselves. I don't know that I buy into that. All I know is that it's worth remembering that people have something to offer. I wouldn't want to go anywhere where somebody just thought they were doing me a favor all the time. One of the defining moments in my seminary career that changed my outlook on the world came from a back-to-back class. I was on a Wednesday class, and the professor was teaching. He was a very bright man and asked us about a scripture, and he used the King James Version, and it was a word in Romans 2:11 I wasn't familiar with because in my home church I didn't use King James. I knew the New American and I knew the NIV pretty well, and in that particular verse the wording is very different. So when he asked us about the scripture, I didn't have it right away, which was not like me at that particular time. The professor just lambasted the class. Preachers in training, how do you not know your Bible better than this? And it was a tirade. And I took it personally. And if you know me, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And when he didn't know scripture later, and then the text and the class, and I did, you're teaching preacher. How do you not know any better than this? Sure, he really appreciated that very much. The next day I was in a preaching class with a legend teaching the class. Far and away the most renowned professor I had. And the kid forgot he was preaching the preaching class. And he had a newspaper. And he read part of the newspaper, and then he tried to apply God to it. And the sermon was not good. I mean, it was really good for having no prep. But it was quite obvious, everyone knew. I mean, we had to turn in a manuscript, he had nothing. And that professor told him how insightful he was and how impressed he was that on no notice he could get that much out of what he did. And I asked him afterwards, I was a very good friend with the professor, and I said, why did you do that? Why did you hammer the kid? Or it wasn't that good? And he goes, no, it wasn't that good. But he's a young man. And if I affirm him, it'll mean a lot more to him. It'll carry him a lot longer than if I tear him down. And then he said, Chan, I've learned that if I look at the world like everybody has something to teach me, my life works a lot smoother than if I think I have to teach everyone something. And it always struck me that the living legend was the one affirming students, and the other professor, who was well thought of but not a legend, felt the need to tear other people down. People have things to offer us. So we'll ask you to do things here when you come to the church. And we'll do that because we can use your help. And you'll have something to offer. But know that it's a good way to get involved here. It's as much for you to do something as it is for us to ask it. But I think everybody here has something they have to offer. This guy, Hobab, he doesn't have anything particularly spiritual. He just knows the area. He's a tour guide. And he uses that for God. And I don't know what your gifts are, but I know there's something you can do at this church that'll help. And we would love to have you do that. So my challenge for you today is this twofold. And it's a simple challenge, and again, it's probably something you've heard before. But within this week, before next Sunday, I challenge you to ask somebody in this church. You now know what we have to offer. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be a big sell. Just, hey, would you like to come see our church? And if they ask you why, now you know. You've got some things that you can sell them on if you have to sell them. The other thing is if you're here, and most of you already do this anyway, I've never been in a church that was this active, but if you're not doing anything, so think of one thing you can do that you would like done in this church. It doesn't have to be particularly spiritual. We are redoing the entire rooms over here. If you have something you would like to do, Christina has been given carte blanche to do whatever she wants with these rooms. If you can paint, you can do something like that. Whatever it is, whatever you think you can do, there are things that can be done around here that we would love to have your help with. But if nothing else, as simple as it is, just appreciate what we have here. I mean, I love you people, and I'm so grateful that I'm a member of this church, and a part of this church. And appreciate that. And if you get a chance, help out or ask somebody else here. But know that your church and your pastor loves you very much.